Billy Wagner finished his career as one of the most dominant closers of all time, a lefty who topped out at over 100 miles per hour, and he wasn't even using his natural throwing arm. So, let's look at the life and career of Billy Wagner and look at his strong Hall of Fame case.
Totally sports-esque. Major League.
If there's one common theme throughout all of Billy Wagner's life, it's overcoming adversity. Wagner was born in Virginia to 16 and 18-year-old parents. His father, William, was an all-county pitcher who married Yvonne Hall right out of high school, and when Billy was just 5 years old, the two got divorced. As a result, him and his sister spent the next 10 years living with different parents, step-parents, and grandparents, often relying on food stamps. As Wagner said himself, breakfast included a few crackers and a glass of water. And in this time, Wagner suffered an injury that would change his life. At age 7, while playing football, one of Wagner's friends would fall on his right arm, aka his throwing arm, and broke it. And just 6 weeks later, after the cast was removed, he broke his right arm again while climbing monkey bars. Unfortunately for him, he didn't suddenly have a major league arm when they took off the cast like Henry Rowe and Gardner, so Wagner had to learn to throw with his left arm. He would turn his right-handed glove inside out, and to take out his anger, he would chuck footballs, rocks, and of course baseballs at the side of his grandfather's house, discovering that he threw harder with his left arm, and eventually reaching the point where aluminum sidings fell off the house as a result of how hard he was throwing. And 7 years after suffering the injury that would force him to change arms, he moved in with his aunt, uncle, and cousins 25 miles away from where he spent his entire life in Marion. As a result of the constant shifting between relatives throughout his childhood, Billy fell a year behind in school. He was supposed to enter the 8th grade in 1986, but after coaches and administrators at Tazewell High School, an hour away from his new home, saw him play, they saw a kid who threw so hard that it could hurt other middle schoolers. Billy would then be socially promoted to his freshman year in 1986. Billy would play football in the fall and baseball in the spring, where he played center field and dominated on the mound, even striking out 19 of 21 batters he faced in one game. In his senior year, he hit .451 with 29 RBIs, and on the mound, he struck out 116 in 46 innings, with a 1.52 ERA. His coach wrote to many Division I schools to drop interest in Billy, who was throwing in the mid-80s at the time. But Tazewell High School was very out of the way, and by his senior year, Billy was just 5'5" and weighed 135 pounds, and with his known control problems, Division I scouts were not going out of their way to look at him. Wagner then decided to follow in his cousin Jeff's footsteps and go to Division III Ferrum College to play football and baseball, but the football coach told him to focus on baseball. He listened, and in the end, it was a great move. During the 1992 season, Wagner set an NCAA record by striking out 19.1 per 9 innings. He also set a record for the fewest hits per 9 at 1.88. Unlike his high school days, Major League scouts were showing up as his fastball was reaching the mid-90s. Agents were taking Billy out for dinner, though it was against the NCAA rules, but it didn't matter, because Wagner was obviously not going back for his senior year, and that was made official when he was drafted by the Houston Astros in the first round. To start his professional career, Wagner was a starting pitcher, and like he had done at all levels, he dominated in the minor leagues. He led all minor league pitchers across every level in strikeouts in 1994 at 204, striking out 12 per 9 for the Quad Cities River Bandits. The only thing that plagued him like it had throughout his entire career to that point was command issues. In the 153 innings he pitched in 1994, he walked 91 batters, hit 8 batters, and threw 12 wild pitches, resulting in 5.4 walks per 9. And had an ERA of 3.29. Not terrible, but probably is lower with better command. The following year, Wagner bounced around double and AAA, and put up numbers similar to the previous year. At 146.1 innings, he had an ERA of 2.89, while striking out 157, giving him a K per 9 of 9.7. And more important, he lowered his walks per 9 to 4.2, which went a long way in his lower ERA, pitching in hitter-friendly parks at a higher level. And as a result, Wagner was added to the Astros 40-man roster in May, meaning he had a chance to get called up later in the season. And right after getting news that he was being added to the 40-man roster, he received terrible news. When his father-in-law, who became a father figure in his life, and his stepmother were murdered. The man responsible would be sentenced to life in prison, putting a damper on things, as Wagner would get called up for his debut 4 months after the tragic events. He made his debut on September 13th against one of his future teams, the New York Mets, and was hitting close to 100. Wagner induced a fly ball, and that was it for his debut, as future Mets manager Terry Collins would make a call to the bullpen, a huge moment in his career that was unfortunately overshadowed by tragic off-field events. The following year, Wagner would make 12 starts in AAA, striking out 86 batters in 74 innings with a 3.28 ERA. And in June of that year, Wagner would get called up and join the Astros bullpen. Wagner becoming a reliever was a great thing for him, he said. Dating all the way back to high school, he would get so nervous before his starts that he would often vomit. Now as a reliever, there isn't much time to overthink things, removing the huge anticipation and vomit stains. Wagner took over the closer role after Todd Jones was injured and converted 9 out of 13 save opportunities, finishing with a 2.44 ERA and 11.7 strikeouts per 9, all the while allowing 5.2 walks per 9. The Astros would collapse at the end of the year, keeping them from the playoffs. But the following year, both Wagner and the Astros would start their peak. In his first full major league season, he converted 23 out of 29 saves, and in 66.1 innings, he struck out 106 batters, an Astros franchise record for relief pitchers. He also set a major league record with 14.4 strikeouts per 9, the most for any pitcher with at least 50 innings pitched. And the following year, he would start the year converting 19 straight saves until July 11th. Just 4 days later, Wagner sustained his first serious injury in the majors after being hit by a ball on the left side of his head. He had to be carted off the field and suffered from a concussion that put him on the DL for nearly a month. He would pitch the rest of the season when he returned, pitching just 6 less innings than last year, with a higher K per 9 and lower ERA that went a long way in helping the Astros set a franchise record in wins at 102. But unfortunately, they would lose in the NLDS. And while his first 2 full seasons were incredible, 1999 may have been his career year. He would make the All-Star team for the first time, and by the end of the season, he had pitched 74.2 innings, giving up just 35 hits, while striking out 124 to once again break the K per 9 record with 14.9, and lowering his walks per 9 to 2.8, while also lowering his ERA to 1.57 and nearly having a better WAR than his last 3 seasons combined. All this was enough for him to receive the Royals Relief Man of the Year award. He also finished 4th in Cy Young voting and even finished 16th in MVP voting, behind his 2 future Hall of Fame teammates in Craig Biggio and Jeff Bagwell. But while 1999 was arguably his best year, in the first year of the 21st century, he arguably had his worst. Wagner started off good, recording his first 3 saves, but in mid-May, he blew saves in back-to-back games, and struggled immensely afterwards. The speed of his slider dropped, and his ERA rose all the way to 6.18 in mid-June, while his K per 9 was nearly 6 points lower than the previous year, and his walks per 9 more than doubled. And in mid-June, he was put on the disabled list with a torn flexor tendon that caused him to miss the final 3 months of the season. But like he had throughout his life, he responded to the adversity and came back the following year, converting 39 of 41 saves, with a 2.73 ERA in 62.2 innings with 79 strikeouts, enough to make another All-Star appearance and win the NL Comeback Player of the Year. And after a solid 2002, 2003 would be his final year with the Astros, where he had a year that is right there with 1999 as being his best year. The year of 2003 gave him a career high in saves, innings pitched, and appearances, while having an ERA below 2 and a K per 9 of 11. He also led the league in games finished, and by far and away led the league in pitches 100+ miles per hour at 159, and second was the legend Bartolo Colon at 12. These numbers earned him his 3rd All-Star appearance and helped him finish in the top 25 of MVP voting. And the reason this was his last season in Houston was because after the World Series that year, Wagner criticized the Astros front office for not building a championship caliber team. In response, the Astros traded Wagner to the Phillies for Brandon Duckworth and 2 minor leaguers. Wagner would say, "I'm excited about coming to Philadelphia because they obviously have made a commitment to winning a championship." And well, the year of 2004 did not go to plan, as the Phillies would not make the playoffs, and Wagner's season was shortened after he strained his right hand. In the following year, he once again showcased his adversity when he would once again lead the league in games finished and had a career-best ERA with 1.51 in 77.2 innings, as he made the All-Star team for a 4th time. But like his time in Houston, his time in Philadelphia ended with criticism after teammates confronted him after he said the Phillies had no chance to make the playoffs in September. He did end up being right about that, as his former team made the World Series, but either way, in free agency, he moved to a new team in the New York Mets. He would pick up 40 saves in 2006, including the 300th of his career, as he helped the Mets win their first division title in 18 years, and finished 6th in Cy Young voting. But in the playoffs, he wasn't great, finishing with an ERA of 9.53 and earning the loss in Game 2 of the NLCS that the Mets would lose in 7. 2007 would bring Wagner his 5th All-Star appearance, and that's mainly because of his stellar first half, where he saved 17 out of 18 games, had an ERA of 1.94, and even finished July with an ERA of 0. But in August, he had an ERA of 6.23, and ended the month blowing a crucial game against the Phillies that ended up being the difference in September, a month where he dealt with back spasms as a sign of things to come. On May 5th, 2008, Wagner would once again call out his teammates after a 1-0 loss against the Nationals. This one in particular was addressed to teammates who weren't showing up to press conferences. Regardless, this didn't stop him from earning his 6th All-Star appearance, where he would actually blow a save in the longest All-Star game ever. But the major development that came from 2008 came in September, when it was announced that he tore his UCL, and just like every pitcher now, he needed Tommy John surgery. This would result in Wagner being sidelined for almost a year. He remained on the Mets 40-man roster and wouldn't appear until August 20th. He would make another appearance on the 24th, but the day after, he would be traded to the Boston Red Sox, where he would appear in 15 games with an ERA of 1.98. Prior to his injury, he had said that he didn't plan on pitching after 2009, but after such a stellar career, he didn't want it to end like that. He signed a 1-year deal with another NL East team in the Atlanta Braves, where he announced that this would be his final year. And in his final year, he had one of his best. He would record his 400th save on June 25th, and would make the All-Star team for the 7th and final time. He finished 2010 with his best ERA at 1.43 in 69.1 innings, and for the first time since 2003, he struck out over 100 batters, and had his highest K per 9 since 1999 at 13.5. The Braves would make the playoffs, and his final career appearance came in Game 2 of the NLDS, where he was taken out after 2 batters after injuring his left oblique. Wagner could not recover before the series was over, where the Braves would lose. With the numbers in his final year, many wondered if he would still continue given that he clearly could, but Wagner remained stagnant and wanted to spend more time with his family, and ended his career after 2010, as he stated before. He ended his 16-year career with a 2.31 ERA in 903 innings pitched, had a whip of .998, a WAR of 27.8, and struck out 1,196 batters, giving him a K per 9 of 11.9. Incredible stats for a relief pitcher, but as we asked earlier, is this enough for the Hall of Fame? To this point, according to Hall of Fame voters, it's a no. He received either 10 or 11% in the first 3 years, but these ballots were crowded, and after that, he kept climbing each year to 17, to 32, to 45, to 51, and most recently, 68%, putting him on the cusp. And with this being his 9th year on the ballot, he only has 2 more chances to reach 75%. And well, I think he has a very good chance, especially in a year like this, when there's one no doubt Hall of Famer in Adrian Beltre, and many, including Wagner, that are debatable. The reason Wagner is tricky is because he is a closer, and unlike other Hall of Fame relievers, he was mainly a one-inning pitcher, and that's the main criticism in his Hall of Fame case. If he were to make the Hall of Fame, his 903 innings would be the least in the entire Hall of Fame by over 100, as Bruce Sutter pitched 1,042 innings in just 12 years. And you can argue that he did not have an effect on the game in the way a reliever like Dennis Eckersley did, and didn't have the same clutch ability as the 2 best closers in his era in Mariano Rivera and Trevor Hoffman, and that's further backed up with his postseason ERA totaling over 10 in his 14 appearances. But while he may not have been as groundbreaking as an Eckersley or a postseason legend like Rivera, what separates Wagner from others is the fact that he was simply dominant. And not necessarily in the way that the game felt absolutely over when Mariano Rivera came in, but in the sense that hitters could not touch him. Of the pitchers who have pitched at least 900 innings, Billy Wagner has the highest K percentage at 33.2, over Jacob deGrom, Chris Sale, and other modern pitchers in the era of strikeouts. Amongst these pitchers, he also has the highest K per 9 at 11.92, and he also leads in the lowest opponent batting average, whip, and hits per 9. And when we look at just the 123 relievers who pitched 900 innings or more, Wagner's ERA ranks 2nd behind Mariano Rivera. He also finishes behind him in ERA+. And of these 123 pitchers, Wagner has the 4th least amount of innings, but has the 6th most strikeouts. So in a sense, you could argue that Wagner was the most dominant reliever of all time from a pure power sense, in a time where offense was high. And perhaps Wagner was ahead of his time considering the amount of power pitchers we have now. That puts his record-setting 14.9 Ks per 9 in 1999 now at 7th. And that alone makes me believe he should be in the Hall of Fame. He doesn't have the longevity of literally any Hall of Fame pitcher by innings pitched, but in the innings he did pitch, he dominated like few pitchers ever have. I really believe he will get in one of these next 2 years, but if he doesn't, then the Today's Game era committee will certainly let him in if they let someone like Harold Baines in, and one of those they let in was Lee Smith, primarily a relief pitcher who pitched in the 80s and 90s and had the saves record until it was broken by Trevor Hoffman. But while me and many others think Wagner should be in the Hall of Fame, it's ultimately in the hands of the Hall of Fame voters, who cannot always be trusted.
I don't trust like that.
But ultimately, it's hard not to root for a guy like Billy Wagner, who battled immense adversity throughout his entire life, for personal reasons and with the injuries that forced him to switch throwing arms, at a point where many kids will quit if they had to do so. Wagner is a great story of overcoming adversity, and I think and hope he will join the likes of Dennis Eckersley, Trevor Hoffman, Mariano Rivera, and in the future, Albert Pujols as the great relief pitchers to make it to the Hall of Fame.